this is the story about a little boy that took place in one of our big northern cities. The little boy's mom had died, and his dad had ran away. And he had to sell papers on the street corners to pay his way. Now, one night he was walking past a little mission house, and he heard the preacher, and their preacher, and he was telling about Jesus. The little fellow said, "Why, if Jesus is in there, I'll go in and I'll give him one of my papers." So he goes in and he sits down about halfway to the building. And when the altar call was given that night, why, he was the first to get up and go pray. And as he knelt there at the altar, they could hear him say, "Jesus, this is Jimmy. Jesus, this is Jimmy." Now he did this about 3 nights in a row. And some of the committee got together and they called the pastor over and they said, "We want to talk to you about that little boy and that simple prayer that he prays." So the pastor called the little boy over and he said, "Son, let me talk to you about that prayer." Now with a puzzled look in his eyes and the tear trickled down his face, he said, "Well, preacher, I don't know how to pray, but you've made Jesus sound so good that I wanted him to know who I was. And all I know to say is, Jesus, this is Jimmy." So we went back and sat down. And when the service was ended that night, well, little Jimmy was the first to get up and leave. But just as he walked out the door, they heard a dull thud. Now they all ran outside to see what was wrong, and there lay little Jimmy, all covered with blood. Now they gathered his little body up and they rushed him to the hospital. But when they got him there, the doctor just took one look at him, shook his head, said, Why, it's impossible for the little fellow to live. Why, when nearly every bone in his body is crushed." And about that time, the pastor looked over and he saw the little fellow's lips began to move. He knelt down to see what he was saying. And he was saying, "Jesus, this is Jimmy. Jesus, this is Jimmy." Well, just as that little boy's body left this whole world for a new one, well, that whole room lit up and got silent. Just as a great big voice said, "Jimmy, this is Jesus. Come on home, son. Come on home." He's coming home. He's coming home. And you'll never more, no more you'll roam. 'Cause he opened wide his arms of love. And now Jimmy, he's going home. As I said, that will be my last song. But just in case that someone here is not prepared or ready to meet the Lord, let me give you that opportunity now. Will you be just as little Jimmy? Don't walk away from us, because you don't know what's on the other side of the door. Jimmy walked out that door, and in the song it sounds like a car hit him. But just before he walked out that door, he said, Jesus, this is Jimmy. Jesus, this is Jimmy. He gave his life to the Lord, and he walked out the door. I want you to think for just a moment, had he not given his little life to the Lord, what might have happened? I have been called in to do funerals, and one in particular I'll remember. The lady called me, good friends of mine, said, Art, we want you to come and sing at Mommy's funeral. I went over, I think it was on the Friday night at the wake, and I asked her, I said, was your mother saved? She said, no, Art, she wasn't saved. See, folks, she laid down that night and went to sleep. And she didn't wake up. And from what her daughter says, she went out of this world unprepared to meet God. She laid down and she went to sleep. Folks, you don't know tonight. When you lay down or when you get on your car and you walk out on that street, drive out on that street, you don't know what's going to happen. And if you're not ready, will you get ready tonight? Didn't we have just about 30 seconds of your time, would you? If you're not ready, could you walk this way and let us pray with you tonight? If you're not, by this I'm going to take it that everybody here tonight is ready to meet the Lord. Give the Lord and give yourself a great big hand.